Hello, I'm Tony Parsons, and welcome to the Tony Parsons Show. As a news broadcaster and journalist for the past 50 years, I've reported on the major news events that have shaped our nation. I've interviewed prime ministers, premiers, thought leaders, and other people of distinction from around the world. My goal with this interview series is to help you, my audience, discover the person behind the credentials, while at the same time, I'll invite them to share their professional insights, experiences, and aspirations. My accomplished guest today is Leslie Stojsic. To say that my guest had a successful career as a news executive and communications leader would be, frankly, an understatement. With over 2 decades at Canada's top broadcast news divisions, her credentials and experiences are unparalleled in the industry. She served as managing editor for The New Reality on Global National News, executive producer of Global National News, senior producer of Power and Politics on the CBC, producer of The National, and Peter Mansbridge One-on-One. She's been a recipient of a number of awards during her career so far. Believe me, they were well earned. Leslie, thanks for joining me today. I want to begin with, I know a little of your background. I know you were born in Montreal. I know you lived in Toronto for a while. And then you ended up in Connecticut. Just doesn't seem to fit to me, but what happened?
West Hartford, Connecticut. Wasn't my choice. I was a middle schooler. My dad got a job offer with a savings and loan. The year was 1987. So those in your audience will probably know well what happened in that savings and loan tumble in the United States and then the stock market crash in that Black October of 87. We had moved there. And so it was my sister and me in a new school, well, different schools, but great schools, actually. It was a really great neighborhood where diverse, like mixed, but a good mix, of people from different backgrounds, different income levels. And yet that year ended and we just made a family vote decision to come back to Canada. And that decision was very important in terms of an exposure to living in the States, which was a wonderful year.
You said it solidified your love of Canada.
It did, because, here I am thinking like going to America, the big, where the streets are paved with gold, not as a refugee, but 1980s culture in America. It's like, remember, it's like the Reagan years and the economy rolling, and you think it's sort of going to be all everything. And it's actually, Connecticut is New England. It's a small town. I'm used to Toronto or in suburban Toronto. And it seemed very provincial. Kids in the class were nice kids, bright kids, but no exposure to the world outside their town or their state. And very few of their parents owned passports. I remember that, thinking that they were impressed that both our parents had passports and that we had passports for the kids. And that taught me a lot about their view on the world. And I think what I took away from it is just learning what we learned in geography and history was not just about Canada, but about the world. In Connecticut, it was very much, the sort of American narrative. And I think that how they are inform me about the citizenry, and also really informs me today about the kinds of currents we see taking place in the States right now.
And when did you decide you wanted a career in journalism?
Well, first of all, I a belated thank you for the invite here, Tony. To get an invitation from a legend like you it's very, the word is humbling, but it was astonishing, and I just really want to appreciate and also salute you, because it's people like you that I grew up watching that made me think, I'm so interested in this. I love this. And I love that you ask about the early questions, because to me, that was always the favorite part of shows. I started watching A&E Biography, and I love that. And I love those early years because I think they are formative and they do put an imprint on you in a certain way. And so when did I have that first? I always watched the news growing up, didn't really think about it, went to McGill, wanted to be a doctor, and ended up my grades were good, but not exceptional. And I really loved history. And so I just decided to keep following history. And then in my third year, someone asked me to write for the paper. And that was the moment. I wrote a couple of articles. I became a features editor the year after in my final year. And that was it for me. And I loved editing. I loved writing. I loved working with and recruiting writers. I loved refining their stories, focusing them. And I loved telling stories that weren't seen in the Montreal regular media, and also not even in the other parts of the sort of student press or alternative press. It was really a lot of fun, and was able to inject humor and personality. we we had a we had a political column that followed student politics in the paper. Not my name. I don't take credit for it, but there's a gentleman who's fairly prominent in national media now. His name is David Reevely. Was his column. He called it Wanker Watch. But again, it had a certain cheekiness to how we covered the news in the McGill community and beyond, and I loved that. And it was also the one of the best work situations of my life because we were all volunteering, we all loved it, and we all came together. Very little friction, a lot of collaboration, and I'm lucky I had that because experiences in newsrooms weren't always going to be that supportive and collaborative the whole way through. So I'm very lucky I had that, and I never went to J school. I thought I'd rather have someone pay me to learn than me pay a school. And I
Okay.
figured if like Edward R. Murrow could do it and Walter Cronkite could do it, I could take a shot at it too. So I got my history degree and then graduated and then tried to figure out what I was going to be in the world of journalism.
One of the first things you did in television was to land a job as production assistant for Global's morning show.
In Montreal, yeah, we had about not that many viewers. Global in Montreal was a startup, so it was the third rated English news channel, or TV channel, I should say, but for news. And it was a ton of fun. I worked from 4:30 until 9 in the morning. All my friends made fun of me. And, they all like, I'm not watching your show. Your show is not, I said, it's not designed for you. It's designed for, parents in the West Island of Montreal. And always knew it was a stepping stone, but I got exposed to all different kinds of jobs. And of course, as you know, Tony, in these newsrooms, you get to do a lot of different jobs. So I got to do a lineup editing and a little bit of reporting here and there, filling in and case producing, trying to connect and book guests, and then doing the pre-interviews and setting them up for a good interview. I developed all those skills, and I'm so lucky I had that. It was this extraordinary woman named Liz Travers who took me on as an intern and then hired me. And yeah, she was a real dynamo. And a lot of us in that newsroom have gone on to do interesting things in the industry. And she has that amazing eye and nose for talent.
You went on to work with a friend of mine. I call him a friend. I don't know him that well, but I sure have followed his career over the years. His name is Peter Mansbridge. What was that like, working with Peter?
Life-changing, extraordinary, better than I could have hoped then and even hope today, is how I would sum it up. Hindsight is 2020, but foresight, the notion that I was going into a job interview maybe to do some work on this show called The National, which was the dream job. I was very lucky to just have an opportunity. So I was that chase producer on just after 9/11, and then on the precipice of the Iraq War. Was Canada going to go in? Had cow, SARS, all these issues that hit us. And Peter gave me my love for politics. I started producing the At Issue panel with Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne. At the time, it was Alan Gregg was on, and then Bruce Anderson came on, and I loved doing that. And then by 2006, I was his producer for Mansbridge One-on-One, which was the talk show where I tried to book people and set them up for conversations. I never did this part. I always did the behind the scenes like your producers do.
You came in contact with a lot of famous people, even presidents. You went to the White House, did you not?
We did. That was, the get of all gets, right? The chase producer's dream. We'd been working on that for quite some time, and it was a team of people who pulled it all together. Official channels, behind the scenes. There was a moment where David Plouffe, who was the campaign manager, David Plouffe and David Axelrod were the two top advisors to Obama. After he won the election, but before the actual inauguration, David Plouffe gave one public speaking event, and it was in Toronto. I was talking to a big room of people. I mean, at least 2,000 people. And so I showed up there with a catalog and talked to a person in the clipboard. I'm here for David Plough from, CBC News. Oh, go right ahead. Got to the VIP room. And when I talked to him, I said, I just want to let you know, we're so excited to have you in Canada and also excited for the president to visit here because traditionally the US president visits Canada first. Not always the case, but we were hoping that that would be the case with President Obama. And to tell him that I put in an interview request. And I said, and so here's some examples of people we've spoken to. Hamid Karzai, I had mentioned Ted Sorensen. Ted Sorensen was a speechwriter. You would probably know him from for JFK. And Ted Sorensen predicted that Obama would win when everyone thought it was going to be Hillary getting the nomination. And he said, "Oh, when did you do that interview?" I told him, and he goes, calculating. He knows where things were in the polls. He went, "Wow, do you have a copy of that?" I said, "Absolutely." I had DVDs, right? I had it already. And then the room said, "Oh, if you're going to do one interview, she's right. You got to do it with this guy, Peter Mansbridge. He's the guy." So that was a good moment. Still no yes. No yes until literally the day before. I got a call, and it was from the National Security Council. And it was the president who'd been inaugurated just 3 weeks earlier. President has a few minutes in his schedule ahead of the visit to Canada, which he did end up booking. And he can give you 10 minutes. Do you think you could make 10 minutes of time for the president of the United States tomorrow? And so I went, yeah, one moment, please. Yes, we can make that happen.
Good for you. Good for you.
Didn't want to appear too eager. that official way, and again, there were a lot of back channels and connectivity that we made. There was a Canadian who was helping on the advance team, that a lot of people who kind of pushed it forward, but it wouldn't have been possible without Peter's reputation, right? So it was an extraordinary. So that's the lead up to it. I mean, I think you were asking me what's it like to be in the White House.
Yeah, Canadian goes to the White House to talk to presidents. Was it a thrill?
It had never been done before. We'd never seen a Canadian interview the president, sitting president in the White House at that time. And again, this president, this historic president, it was great. A few things that really stuck out in my mind were like, woman came over with like, "Now, honey, I'm going to help you with your flowers. You just tell me where you want and where you want to set it up." And I thought, wow, how many florists do you have and stuff? "Oh, we have 4." It's like, right. This is not the same as 24 Sussex. Okay. And we were in the map room of the White House, and notably, it was on the day that Obama went to sign the stimulus bill in Denver. So that was a very big deal. Yeah, a big deal for us for the interview, but for America, the big deal was the stimulus bill that he had to go sign. So he comes in the room. We get the warning, 10 minutes, 2 minutes away, 1 minute, he's on his way, sits down, hello, sits down. And Robert Gibbs, the White House press secretary, comes over to me. I introduce myself, and he's like, lighting's all blown out. It's wrong. He's looking at an LED monitor, which, as you know, like depending on the angle, if you're not looking at it the right angle, it looks dark, but it's not. So my lighting guy, does this, and then he moves it right back so it's correct. And as I'm talking to him, I said, just casually, like, I'll just sort of, what do we have, 10, 15, 20 minutes? And he goes, "You got 10 and you're lucky. I'm not deducting you for this." So we sit down, and what was significant about Obama and all the interviews I've done was, I mean, everyone, but including very powerful people, visually acknowledged everyone in the room, even if he couldn't shake their hand. That stood out to me. Sat down, and then during the interview, very still, steady, had a hand like this, but nothing more than that. I got the wrap up, signed from Gibbs. And so I'm sitting behind Obama to give Peter cues. I give Peter the sign. "Last question, Mr. President." Yeah. And so we wrap the interview. He's rushed out to go get to the helicopter, Marine One, to get to Andrews Air Force Base so they can fly him to Denver. We're checking tape. Did we get everything? Yes. Okay. And then really tall guy walks in the room, brown hair, friendly guy. He's like, can I just introduce myself? My name is Marvin Nicholson. Marvin Nicholson is from Victoria.
Uh,
Marvin Nicholson is his body guy, which is like the guy who gets him what he needs, there with him, sort of a support, not at a policy level, but really as a there for anything he might need. He said, "I just like to meet this man," and he's, Peter. I'm Peter Mansbridge. He goes, "Oh, I know who you are. It's a real thrill to meet you." And so Obama's there with him, and I said, "You work with this guy," meaning Obama, "and you're excited?" He goes, says to Obama, "Oh no, this guy's a legend. Like he's a real thrill." So we hadn't had a picture with Obama because the White House press secretary was already on the helicopter. So I took this opportunity to say, if you don't mind, and I had an old point and click, and you don't mind, Mr. President, and I made sure that Peter and the president were together. Just clicked a few photos, and Peter starts talking to Marvin about Victoria. I love Victoria. Oh, I love it. Oh yeah, it's like such a beautiful part of the country. And they were talking about how, well, there's another famous Canadian from there, Steve Nash. And the story goes, I said, "So now, wait, do you guys actually play basketball together? Because you're always together, you know?" And because Marvin is about 6'7". So we're looking at these two guys like, "Oh, you guys must play basketball together," because it was sort of known that Obama liked to play basketball in his spare time, as well as golf, but really basketball. I said, "Oh, you guys play basketball?" No, 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 it's more golf. Like, that's too bad because, like, actually, I said to the president, Marvin's quite a bit taller than Steve Nash. And then the president says to me, taps me on the shoulder, says, "Yeah, but Marvin's got no game." Anyway, guys, we'll see you in Canada. And why don't you come out to the White House lawn and see Marine One? It's pretty cool. We'll see you in Canada in a couple of days. Thanks so much. We were like, wow. He didn't need to do that. The president was being rushed away. He came in to be there to do that for Marvin. It was just a really nice moment.
Must
And
have been.
again, that's wasn't necessary on anyone's part to do that. And that kind of stuff sticks with you.
Yeah. And there was a name that cropped up in your list of guests. Diana Krall. What was that all about? She seemed to be outside that brigade.
Yeah, and you're right about that, right? Like, it wasn't in Peter's comfort zone. It was actually the second interview I ever produced for Mansbridge One-on-One, which by that time had been on the air for a few years. But I said, "Oh, Diana Krall's people, she has a new album, and this is a story about like people taking risks." Peter said to me, "Oh, I don't know anything about jazz music. Like, I can't speak with any like fluency about that. But if you can find something for me to talk about with her, I'll do it. Like, she's a legend. I just don't. I'm outmatched on the jazz question." I said, "Okay." Well, so she had published, I think it was like a children's music, or she just had a kid. There was some connection there to that. But also, she's a collector of Bill Reed art and Indigenous art, and Peter loves that. So I found a way for them to talk about the arc of a career, kids, and also art. And he was pretty nervous. It was actually kind of endearing to see that, because not because she's a star, but because he wants guests to feel that they have a conversation with someone who's ready to meet them, at least on their level, and draw good stuff out. And then afterwards, after we finished rolling, Diana, who's so nice, said, "Oh, I was so nervous for this, Peter." "Oh, me too." And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? And also very Canadian that you had these two legends in their own, realms that had this, feeling of nervousness. And that was a lesson to me that, like, you can be at the top of your game, but, you know, those nerves, there's something about them, and they're kind of good for you. It's good to try doing different things that make you feel nervous. And in the end, they were happy with the interview. Nothing went wrong. And it was, I thought, a very endearing moment.
Certainly sounds like it. You've covered a lot of stories, not the least of which is one I enjoyed recently because I was sent a copy and I looked at it and I was fascinated by it. It involved a young woman named Nicole and a plane crash. And she was interviewed by Peter Mansbridge after the incident. What was that about?
Yeah, that was about 13 years ago. Nicole Williamson is her name. And at the time, she was a young 23-year-old geologist. The plane crash happened in Canada in the summertime. I believe it was actually August 20th, 2011. And Nicole was one of three people who walked away from a 737 that slammed into a hill in Resolute in the north, in the far north, killed everyone else on the plane. And in 3 weeks, she was a very, very shy person. She was not seeking the spotlight at all. Got a contact for her through a colleague at CBC. Again, I have to salute colleagues who are helpful on this kind of thing because it is a team effort. And we did an interview with her in her parents' backyard. You know, Tony, like I think you've probably met people like this. Like if this were America, Nicole Williamson would be a household name. There would be movies about her. There would be like dolls about her. She is such an amazing, extraordinary human being, and not just for the fact that she can describe what it's like to be in the middle of a plane crash. It's it was her poise and her presence and her perfect, almost forensic ability to recount every detail. I remember, and Peter just sort of sitting there, and I just said, "You won't need to ask too much. Just let her go." And every once in a while, it would be like, "So how's it going?" "Well, we're just about to land. Everything seems smooth. I'm in seat 17A." "Okay." "And then what?" "And then we don't know what happens. The plane just breaks apart in front of you, and when a plane crashes, it's not just the physical thing. You smell it. You smell the fuels and the oils. And you're like, right away, she's taking you what it's like to be." And she goes, "And it really literally broke apart right in front of me." And I thought, how am I still alive? I guess I'm not alive. I must be dead. And she's tumbling through the tundra, still attached to her seat.
Hmm.
And, the Peter question, "So how did you know that you were alive?" I heard a little girl crying. There were two little girls sitting in front of her in, I think, 16 in A and B. And one of them started crying, and she was asking for calling for her sister. And she saw the plane was on fire, and there's, yeah, an engine and parts of a wing. And I mean, and by the way, it had totally destroyed one of her legs. So she couldn't even really walk, but she was in shock. She said it felt like being in a spin cycle of a washing machine.
Hmm.
And somehow she sort of gets herself out and goes over to the little girl. And the little girl says to her, she was probably 8 or 9 years old. She says, "This is my very first plane crash." Even when I say it now, it's like, it, you know, Peter said, "What do you do?" So she said, "Well, like I knew that I had to save her." And so that pulled me out of the conversation, if in my head, if, in her head, if she was, alive or not. Pulls her out and she says, "Well, not a lot of people can say that. So we have to get somewhere safe and away from the fire." And just scampered to a place away from the fuel and the fire, and started to talk to her about horses because this little girl had just ridden a horse that summer for her first time as well. And so they were talking about that. And you're saying, "Wow, you've just survived a plane crash and you don't know what's going to happen. And you're in the tundra talking about ponies." She said, "Well, you do what you can to to save a little girl. You do what you can." And I just thought, you're an extraordinary human being. And everyone who watched that interview was like, and she only gave one interview. She never talked to anyone else ever again. And I think about Nicole all the time. I actually, she had spent some time out here, and our schedules never, because she's a geologist and she loves working in the north, our schedules never coincided. But she's someone who I think, I, I feel like Nicole Williamson, wherever she is now, and I'm sure she's doing great things, has the capacity to be an extraordinary leader in whatever she chooses to do. But I hope she chooses to stay in Canada because she's an amazing, amazing woman.
That's a very, very touching story. Brings tears to my eyes. That kind of wisdom coming from that young lady is really something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, it's interesting because you even see on Peter's face as we're getting the story, part of the art of being a chase producer, a booker, as we talked again, the
All right.
person who
Can
does
I
that.
stop you for a moment?
Please, yeah.
I've never heard that term before, chase producer. What the heck is a chase producer?
So that's the person who, when they say, "Oh, hey, this just happened today. Can you find an expert to talk about it? Or can we do a political panel on it? Or can you get an interview with the president of the United States or this plane crash survivor?" find them, establish some kind of connectivity with them, and convince them to do an interview. Do your research and then supply that to the anchor or reporter, and then help them put it all together. And it depends. Sometimes it's in the field, sometimes it's just on a cable news channel. But what that requires is you have to be fast thinking and fast acting. Like I call it like putting out the seeds. Put out the seeds right away because they take time to germinate, and then you harvest them. And then you see
Okay.
who, because not everyone's available. Sometimes the best expert
Yep.
has childcare issues, right? So
Mhm.
okay, so we have to figure out who the next candidate is. Um, that's on a breaking news story, but like on a story like this, whether it's the White House or whether it's Nicole Williamson, you have to develop a real rapport and a sense of trust, and that you're not going to betray them. You're going to be true to their story and never overpromise ever, and be straightforward with them. And that was probably that sort of art of, they call it now in business like stakeholder relations, but it really is this ability to connect and communicate and build trust. So that's, as you know, Joni, right? You had quite a few sources who talked to you.
Mhm.
And why did they talk to you? Because they knew you wouldn't burn them, right? I'm sure you had quite a few moments where you had to, you know, protect someone or deal
Oh,
with a
sure.
very sensitive
Sure.
issue. Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
sure there's a few stories that you broke that that things were a little bit dicey, but they wouldn't have happened if people didn't trust you. So that's part of the art of a chase producer is the ability to get them to talk, convince them to prepare them with the framework. We don't give away the questions, but we prepare them with a good framework for what the conversation could be. And then when it's a political interview, that's a different question. Like we're looking for, or business, you're looking for some kind of accountability. That's different. But again, even in those situations, you have to develop a trust and rapport with their people, because you burn that bridge once, they'll never come back to you, and then that's your whole reputation. And again, I learned a lot from Peter about not not only building the bridges but maintaining them, and how important that sort of Brian Mulrooney was like the master of relationship management, right? And loyalty, trustworthiness, and decency, I think, carry you quite far in this business. But I've tried to make it carry me far.
Well, I can't let you go without mentioning this. The long list of awards you've either been nominated for or won. You've quite a record. One in particular stands out, I know, in your mind and in mine, because it's attached to the White House. Tell me about that one.
I mean, thank you so much. Listen, the awards actually, it's nice to have them, but they mean a lot less than the relationships that we've
Mm.
cultivated, again, with some of these sources and also just with my colleagues. However, one of my colleagues produced this, or a group of my colleagues produced this story, and the gentleman who found it is Jackson Prosco, the Washington bureau chief at Global News. Jackson found this amazing story about an amazing man, and his name is Robert. And Robert used to work for the CIA. He was their master of disguise. And through the Cold War, he would make masks that they could take off and on in 3 seconds. Anything more than that put their lives in danger. And when he left the CIA, he had this incredible skill and he wanted to still do something with it. And he decided that instead of putting people into hiding, he could help bring people out of hiding. So what he does is helps people who are disfigured, either because of cancer or maybe physical violence, like a woman who had her husband just cut her face up with a knife, or who've lost things due to whatever circumstances, are disfigured. He provides them with the prosthetics to be themselves and come out of hiding. And it's an amazing story about, again, about resilience, about art and creativity. And that story won this award from the White House Photographers Association for Best Feature. But it's one of these uplifting stories about a guy you'd never know about, which is exactly the kinds of stories I think really connect with people about. I never knew that. This is an amazing person with an amazing skill doing good work. And I love these uplifting, positive stories because it really counters that narrative that we see out there about, oh, we're so divided, and it's a divisive place. Like, people are doing amazing things. And I tried, to the extent that I tried to put a spotlight and help my colleagues put a spotlight on those stories of those people that showed that actually great people exist, and they're doing great things. And let us show you a snippet of the work that they do and the lives that they're changing. I love that. And it's big. I love uplifting people and I love uplifting stories, and that one really stands out to me.
So let me get on to this because I want to cover it because your point of view is important to me. There are so many changes in the industry you and I have been involved in for so many years. When you look around now, what disturbs you most about what's going on?
There's a lot. There's a lot. I think it's how badly an industry that prides itself on information and understanding and context really badly miscalculated what Facebook and social media were doing in taking all the advertising revenue out of local communities and news media in general, drawing, the end of classified ads, the end, you know, and it's not just for TV, it's all news media that took that agency away and that support away and didn't see it coming and weren't ill prepared to deal with it. In many ways, we tried to partner with some of these organizations, and we see now what has happened with, Meta not posting any links of any Canadian news. So no Facebook, Instagram, can't post any Canadian news links. Now, not that people were always interested in, publishers were not always interested in informing the public. I don't think they were always altruistic. Like Izzy Asper famously said to journalists who were sort of rabble rousing about their mission in life. He said, I think he told one of them, it was like a thorn in his side. I think he said to one of them, "No, your job is to sell bars of soap. Like, that's what you're here for." So I'm not suggesting that there was an altruism and it was perfect. I'm not. But I think the industry miscalculated the effect that this would have on all of us. And then trying to figure out in this emerging industry how to pivot, play with it, oppose it. It's been a real challenge. And I think bad actors and malign actors have taken the power of social media to create a disinformation economy. You've heard it before, I'm sure, right? Like you see it, Tony, the rage economy, videos that are designed to make you feel, incite you, because that leads to an algorithm that leads to more content like that. And it takes people down a rabbit hole of division, anger, conspiracies, disinformation. Unfortunately, I covered this quite a bit in my last few years in my career because it's an issue I care deeply about.
But you lost a program because of cutbacks by Chorus. So you know the effect of this.
Mm-hmm. I do. And our program was a great program to shed light on current affairs, current events shaping our world. And in sort of opposition to a lot of the, like, we heard a lot especially after the pandemic. I'm so sick of what's happening on the news, and there's so much bad stuff in the world. We sort of took that input and said, could we make a show that is about solutions and extraordinary people doing innovative things? And those stories did so well for us. Again, this is before the Meta media ban, but they did really well online. Some of them did really well on YouTube. Some of them did really well in the long form. Some of them did really well on TV. So we were a truly multi-platform show, again, trying our best to negotiate this landscape. And I mean, if we want to talk business, I mean, the problem is our time slot was just a kind of a rotten time slot on a Saturday night. People aren't really going to watch news on a Saturday night when they can watch hockey, right? In Canada. But I think that being it's funny, I don't really feel like we're a victim of that world. There's many factors that go into decisions to, make strategic cuts in a massive media corporation.
Yeah, I'm not picking on Chorus, but they've been through a lot in the last little while. For instance, I worked at a radio station in Hamilton, Ontario, called CHML. Was there for 100 years. Now it's shut down. Chorus has abandoned it. In Kelowna, where I live, the local global station has changed immensely. Its news is now conducted out of Vancouver, so there's nothing going on except reporting locally and transmitting to Vancouver. All of these changes are making a difference in the world you and I once knew.
And making a difference in not just the world, but how we understand ourselves and each other and our neighbors. And again, I'll go back to this, the disinformation. One of the things, in fact, it's interesting, Obama referenced it, Barack Obama referenced it at the Democratic National Convention just recently. This sort of division that is fomenting our lack of understanding and talking to our neighbors and the inability to get along with people, even if they vote differently, but just have those conversations. It's all contributing to that. And news was a really great connector, a real glue for how we talk to each other. Oh, that's happening. Oh, that counselor's doing that. Oh, I didn't know that that business is there. So important to understanding your home space and where your community is going, and fewer and fewer resources that we have and ability to tell those stories with to each other. And I'm not saying that, TikTokers and content producers can't do that, but there is something about a conversation happening, don't you find?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like did you, like, what was your favorite thing to do in the morning, like when you were getting ready for work? Like, what was your morning routine?
I tuned in to the local news, watch the breakfast shows, try and catch up on what went on overnight, and get ready to go to the office and be there and know something ahead of time. That was my aim? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I think of you know, I'm lucky because the internet existed when I was in university, but in it burgeoning, and moving from that era to, I still like listening to morning TV, radio a little bit less. Our household was always a TV household, not a radio household as much, but I still like that ritual.
Hmm.
I still like having something to read. I'm used to it now. I do it online, but like, I like reading books. I still like reading books. I like having it physically there. And again, these things, moving everything to a screen, also, as we know, damaging our children so much that it's having such an impact on our ability to connect and have real conversations with people. Even, like guys having trouble asking a girl on a date, and also, again, the ability to talk to your neighbor about how high the fence should be. There's this undercurrent, and I see it here in BC. I see it even more when I visit Ontario. There is an anger there about the frustration about where the world has gone and going, and that no leader is taking it. And I think that's where you have people with slogans and easy solutions, or easy lines that come off as solutions, where people kind of get sucked into that because they're looking for a sense of, well, who's going to take us either back to the way it used to be, which can never be, or will take us forward in a way that is going to give me stability and reassurance and dignity and give my children a better life than I had. And I think that's the frustration that we see today. And I'm trying not to be too negative. I'm actually very, very positive person, Tony. Um, but it's one of the reasons why I think I gravitated to becoming a British Columbian. Like, uh, we should talk about your friend Doriana Temelo.
We should.
Hired me.
She
Yeah,
was a friend. She was a great friend, and
yeah.
she's sorely missed. I know that she died last year. But you formed a relationship with her. She was your boss.
She was my boss
Yeah.
when I came to Global. She was the news director at Global National, and she hired me to be the executive producer in 2015. She was so worried that I wouldn't like British Columbia.
Hmm.
She kept asking me every week, "But do you like it here? Are you going to stay, or are you sure?" And she didn't need to worry. After that first winter, the winter was dark. I will admit that. I was used to more sun and the light reflecting off the snow in
Hmm.
Montreal and Toronto and Ottawa. However, once I got through that, I was like, "Oh, I see the beauty of this place and the benefits of this place, and I love the different iterations of Canadian aspects here. Multicultural, but in a different way than Montreal or Ottawa or Toronto. It's vibrant in a way that's different. It's got city life in a way that's different, and so much comparison is about what it's not, and I choose to think of what it's like. So I call myself a convert to British Columbianism, and it's really because of Doriana, who was, like you, a legend and well regarded. And while I didn't grow up watching the two of you, hearing people speak about Doriana with the reverence that they did immediately made me realize, okay, I'm in a good place to stay here. And then she retired about 7 months after I began.
Mm.
And what I didn't know was that she was seeding in me, giving me all the tools and the pieces I needed to succeed in this job after after she was gone from the job. And she worked so hard her whole life, so hard. She cared so deeply about the program, getting everything right, all the tiny little details that go into a newscast and all the big questions. She cared about everything. And again, not as we know, right, Tony? Not
Mm.
every news boss is like that.
No.
Um, and she'd never been sick. She was always, when other people got sick, she was a little bit mystified. Well, they're so young. You're so young.
Mm.
She was diagnosed with cancer not too long after her retirement. And that was a real moment for a lot of us who knew. I mean, and I didn't even know her that long, so I can't claim to have had these long-standing ties, but you can see how she had an impact on me just in that very short time. She made a real impact. And her death last year came around the time of the end of my program, The New Reality, and was a real lesson in doing the things that are important to you, holding true to your values, not thinking that there's going to be a future time to have that dinner with someone, as I did with Doriana. And I regret that immensely, immensely, because she's such a good person.
She was a good person and a very integral part of what I did for so many years in British Columbia. She was a big part of the newsroom. And you're right, she will be missed and will be remembered as one of the great reporters, great news people that you and I ever knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. A young person walks up behind you, taps you on the shoulder, says, "Excuse me, I know you're a journalist. I want to get into your business. Can you help me?" What do you say? Do you scare them off, or do you encourage them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tony. I think the sad fact is not many people are doing that. Not many young people are doing that today. There's a movement to be a content creator, or I want to tell stories on TikTok, because fewer and fewer people just even know the medium of a newscast or a journalistic story. Long reads online, I think, a little bit different. So fewer and fewer people are doing that. So if someone asks me, happily, because it means that they're a standout and they appreciate the what journalism is all about, and usually they have a sense of purpose, and I encourage that. I mean, just this morning, I was on my phone to two of my former reporters, both from Global, like unrelated, but one of them just needs to tell me something about her new job, and the other one wanted to sort of confide in me about how sees what's happening at Global News and is looking for work, and do I have some advice for him? So I will absolutely encourage people who have this drive in them to do something great, because storytelling is what we've done since we were lurking in caves. That will always be required, and those skills will always be sought after and needed. And I'm taking that into my life after Global. But I think that what's lacking is people now who even want to do that. They don't necessarily have, like, again, Tony, you had people, I'm sure, in your life who saw talent in you and helped nurture
Mm-hmm.
you and cultivate you and show you maybe a better way of doing things once in a while. I had, as you could hear, I mean, I had that so much from not just Peter, but so many people, and Doriana, so many people in my career who helped me. And I think that's going to be the challenge, for quite aside from the industry challenges and the that we've already talked about. It's that, will they have the kind of mentorship and leadership that is required to help them up their game? I love doing that. And that's actually the part of the job I miss the most.
Mm-hmm. You could always say to them, "Well, why don't you do a podcast?" I mean, that seems to be a trend these days. What's your assessment of this podcast phenomenon?
I mean, to me, it's like, radio.
Yeah.
And I think it taps into a desire for those who want to get away from the soundbite culture and 30 seconds news, 2-minute news story. They're looking for some kind of depth and context, but they're looking for it at their fingertips, and they can order it up like they would order, food on a delivery service. I think that's, part of me feels like if we had been able to do Mansbridge one-on-one during the podcast era, because those long form interviews were so sought after, but just not on a TV schedule, because that was a different time. It was before that, just before that era, because when people watch those interviews, they love them. They love them. And so it's a weird thing that, like, the media is not creating this, but then podcasters are creating this. So there's clearly a market for it. But I'm going to say, like, you probably have some advice, for people as you embark on this. Not everyone has the opportunity to do these long conversations. And I think it's so interesting that someone with your experience and the world that you've seen, when you come to the table with interesting people and questions and insights, it helps. It helps a lot. And I would surely like to hear. I mean, I listen to Peter's podcast regularly, but I don't listen to that many others. Mostly because I'm quite busy these days, not because I'm not interested, but I think it's tapping into a desire for people to understand and connect more with either a subject matter, if it's like, talking about like what's happening in Ukraine, for example, or person, a celebrity, or just any well-known. And I think that's what you're tapping into here.
Listen, you've been very generous with your time, and I thank you so much. And we have a lot more to talk about, I'm sure. But we can do it on another episode if you are available sometime. I'd love to pick it up where we left it off. In the meantime, congratulations on a really, really great career. And thank you so much. You're fascinating. I really enjoyed this.
Well, Tony, it's just been me who thanks you for your whole career and for this conversation today. And I really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for indulging me and walking down memory lane a little bit.
Thank you for tuning in to The Tony Parsons Show, recorded and produced by Mike Peterson at 85 Audio in Kelowna, British Columbia. To learn more about today's guest, please visit our website at thetonyparsonsshow.com. You can reach Tony directly via email at info@thetonyparsonsshow.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, we would greatly appreciate your support. Please consider leaving us a 5-star rating or review on your streaming platform of choice. Join us again next week for a special Global TV reunion episode with Pamela Martin, Wayne Cox, and Cameron Bell.